When you think about the planet of Kairos, it's easy to get stuck on the Timekeeper. He's the center of everything after all. His word, his law, his control. And the type of control he wields is far from the traditional sense. Not only is it planet-wide, but it's absolute, thanks to the implementation of a highly invasive bolt situated directly into a person's spinal column. It allows the Timekeeper to quite literally strip anyone of their free will at any given moment, compelling them to do or say things they otherwise never would, or, in the case of his own underlings, peer directly into their minds to see what kind of information they have stored within their own heads that they have yet to share with anyone else, including the Timekeeper himself.
So many secrets inside this head. Let's see what spills out. Damn it.
The bolt is undeniably the center of the Timekeeper's power. Anyone that has the device installed within their body is far from safe. Through this bolt, the Timekeeper was able to rule not just with fear but absolute inevitability. It's precisely why a true iron grip is held on Kairos with no hope of escaping. But today, instead of diving straight into the Timekeeper, I wanted to start somewhere else, somewhere a little bit more familiar as far as the Borderlands series is concerned, with the people who carried out his will, his lieutenants, the ones who spread his terror across the entire planet, and seemingly continued to do so until the moon of Pandora, Elpis, crashed into the sky and changed everything, not only introducing the Vault Hunter as a sort of unpredictable mayhem with the unexpected results of inspiring his own most powerful commander to become tired of his rule, to rebel, break the chains, and, in her own demented way, become the savior of Kairos. Today we're talking about the former General Callis, the Timekeeper's most loyal and fearsome commander, who in the act of ultimate defiance ripped out her own bolt, and from the moment thereafter officially became known as Callis the Ripper Queen.
Join us! Become a Ripper! The Timekeeper has no hold on us. In shedding our bolts, we are reborn. The risk may frighten you, but there is nothing to fear in fate, for I have seen our destiny, Kairos.
Really, the angle of the Rippers and Callis' own delusions with the moon crashing into Kairos is one that frankly feels like it echoes a little bit of Borderlands 3. Now, I'm keenly aware of that game's less than stellar reputation on its writing, but what I mean here is Tyreen and Troy were able to form a vast army of psychos and bandits via the Cult of the Vault, otherwise known as the COV, or Children of the Vault. Tyreen and Troy didn't exactly offer anything tangible, as it was more so giving them a unifying purpose. They presented themselves as literal gods and gave the psychos a chance to ascend to the Great Vault via a few key things as their foundation. For one, the Calypso twins promised them faith, purpose, and a place in something greater. No longer would they waste their lives fighting each other in the wastelands. Under Tyreen and Troy, their violence was sanctified, directed toward a higher cause. Through devotion, they were told they could achieve immortality itself, feeding Tyreen's power and living on within her, even in death. For the first time, these outcasts, reviled and isolated even among other bandits, were then given a proper belonging, a family, and an identity as the Children of the Vault. At the very center of all of that stood the promise of ascension as well, access to the Great Vault, the supposed gateway to ultimate transcendence that can only be achieved through absolute undying devotion. In this case, the Calypso twins fused religion with spectacle. The twins transformed a scattered horde of the mad and violent into a single fanatical army. With the Callis and the Rippers, on the other hand, it's not that different. Rippers themselves are referred to as such for ripping out their own bolts, in a way officially rejecting the continued rule of the Timekeeper. The names also didn't just describe the action, but also their loyalties or lack thereof in the Timekeeper. And then there's the other more damning part, their loss of cognitive functions. Due to the bolt's critical positioning within the spine, forced removal of it was deemed fatal by its inventor, Zadra. However, as Callis, who presumably was the first or at least the first notable person to rip out her own bolts would prove, such an action wasn't a guaranteed or instant death sentence. Now we'll get into the effects of Callis' bolt removal and how that played a role within building a giant army by doing the exact same thing. But let's take a quick step back and look at what inspired Callis to break away in the first place. If we revisit much of Borderlands 4's initial trailers, we can get a decent idea of her interest with the moon, the founding of her own army, and the war between the Rippers and the Order's own soldiers. But it's not as simple as the sky being fractured and Callis learning that she was lied to by some narrative drawn up by the Timekeeper of, say, no planet or any other galaxy existing outside the realm of Kairos. It also wasn't due to any lack of favor or natural growing hatred for the Timekeeper's rule, the latter of which would come after. Instead, what started her rebellion was a vision given to her after she put up a defense of Carcadia burn in the wake of Elpis crashing into Kairos.
Power up the targeting towers again! If we don't break up these moon rocks before they hit, they'll crater half the region!
Commander Callis, they're not ready yet. They can't fire that quickly.
I'll take a half-charged shot over being crushed to death! Fire it!
The Timekeeper's orders are to abort.
Damn the Timekeeper! We're too late! Take cover! Dead. All dead. But I saw something up there. I saw a woman. She looked like me.
It's this exact echolog that would be the turning point within Callis' position to the Timekeeper and what her true calling was, becoming that woman she saw in the sky. In other words, Callis saw a vision of Lilith who was trapped in the phase. And since Callis had no idea who Lilith was, possibly no idea of what the phase was, and understanding that this woman looked precisely like her, she mistook this vision as something else, herself reaching a divine calling by becoming that woman, achieving transcendence and acquiring her fire wings. It was in the wake of her defiance to leave Carcadia burn as instructed by the Timekeeper, and having this vision that the Timekeeper would then check in on her via her own bolt. He demanded a report of the damage Carcadia burn suffered due to the chunks of moon landing, and instead of being given the damage report, he would be met with a never-before-seen resistant Callis.
I want a full report on the damage to Carcadia.
Get out of my head!
What's this? Callis, you've never been one to resist my order? You may enjoy a long leash as one of my commanders, but don't forget, that bolt in your head means you are an extension of my will.
If that's true, then I must rip the veils from my eyes and rip you from my flesh.
Zadra assured me that would be fatal.
It was. I am reborn. And I am free!
After shattering expectations of Callis dying from such an act of defiance, she would, in her own words, become free. Yet this freedom came at a cost. The forced removal of her bolts left her with tormenting repercussions that she would cleverly later repurpose to harden her resolve and build a belief not only in her own worthiness but those that followed. Surviving this act didn't mean she walked away unscarred. What followed was a condition akin to phantom limb syndrome, where she continued to feel the bolt's presence even though it was gone, compounded by the very real nerve damage left behind. In one captured echolog, Callis explains the lingering effects in vivid detail, describing how her body betrayed her with false signals, as if the Timekeeper's influence still pulsed through her very spine.
I still feel it inside my skull. That metal. The golden chill of surrender. As my own nerves betrayed me and let him in. I wish I could pull it out all over again. Hurt him with my agony. But pain is only part of the proving. If I and to become that woman in the sky, the burning one. I must be more. We must be more. I must make them see what I have seen.
This recording not only reveals her suffering, but also offers insights into the kind of physical and psychological scars many Rippers likely carried after tearing out their bolts. Another ecologue adds to this picture, showing how Callis transformed her torment into persuasion. She told new recruits that by rejecting the Timekeeper and ripping out their own bolts, they too could finally distinguish which thoughts were truly theirs and which ones had been planted inside them.
His presence there, looming in the shadowy recesses. The Timekeeper, always watching, judging, controlling. You serve him ceaselessly, but does he serve you? Which thoughts are yours, and which are his? Do you really know? The Rippers know. On wings of fire, our minds fly free, beyond his control. Join us in the burn.
The thing is, though, these weren't just false claims. She wasn't technically lying, and she even directly suffered from the lasting effects of being at such an easily accessible position from the Timekeeper.
You could never understand the pain of a life stretched beneath the Timekeeper's hand, with his fingers plucking at your tendons, his voice behind your eyes, his hatred flooding your every vein. Who is he to revel in such control?
The Rippers were reborn the moment their bolts were torn out, whether willingly or unwillingly, with Callis believing she was genuinely helping people through the act. At the heart of this transformation was what became known as the Ripper Factory, a grim assembly line where victims were dragged in against their will and subjected to forced bolt removal. Survival meant initiation, proof of worthiness through enduring the most painful trial imaginable. If someone died, which was very likely, then it was no big deal, as it was seen as nothing more than a calling of the weak, proof that they weren't worthy enough to witness Callis' transcendence. It also provided an interesting duality of how this entire thing was seen. From Callis' perspective, this quote-unquote Ripper Factory was the freest place on Kairos, the place where people had the most free will, whereas those that stumbled upon it, such as the Vault Hunters and Zane, considered it a horrible prison. And it was here, within this factory or prison or freest place on Kairos, that Callis also established powerful jammers to blind the Timekeeper to her actions. Drawing on her deep knowledge of his methods, she was able to keep him in the dark about her true goals, her plans, and her growing ability to quietly build an army in opposition to him. It was from this crucible that Callis transformed Carcadia Burn into the beating heart of Ripper territory, and in effect, her own true dominion. Carcadia Burn itself carried a weight like no other region could also match. It had suffered the brunt of destruction from falling fragments of the moon. Its landscape was burned, twisted, and reshaped by fire and stone. What can be seen as a giant wasteland almost feels like a reflection of Callis, scorched by suffering yet reborn like a phoenix. From the ashes, a living symbol of defiance against her former master. The irony here isn't lost. This was the very place she had once proven her loyalty to the Timekeeper, where she had, in her own words, put the boot to people's necks to keep them in line for him. She was once his most ruthless enforcer. She was now his greatest opponent, and the ground she once ruled for him became the foundation of her own rebellion. The significance of Carcadia Burn deepened further in the balance of power, because fewer people in the region still carried their bolts. The Timekeeper's presence here was weaker than anywhere else on the planet. Only a fraction of Carcadia's population, most of them situated back in Carcadia itself, could be overtaken by his will, forcing the rest of the territory to be constantly retaken by deployed order forces. This constant drain on his reach gave Callis the opening she needed to expand and influence and solidify her own control. I do also want to point out here that it was within Carcadia Burn that the adoption of the Psycho Mask took hold. For the Rippers, it became far more than a sign of belonging. It was a symbol of their rebirth that is tied directly to Callis' vision of Lilith and the moon. Within the trailers of Borderlands 4, she is the one that discovers the Ripper mask. She's the one that reapplies it to them. And hence to her, the mask embodied that fiery figure within the sky that she witnessed. The wings of flame that she believed she was destined to inherit. It's honestly a little bit of a clever narrative twist that not only explains the mask's sudden appearance on a brand new planet, but also ties it to Callis' obsession with Lilith and her belief within her own ascension. And speaking of Lilith, Callis' visions extended beyond her. She foresaw the arrival of the 4 Vault Hunters on Kairos. When we first communicate with her within the Carcadia burn, she makes it clear that she had been expecting us.
When the sky broke open, so did the chains at my neck. I saw my future in the wings of flame. It is my divine burden to free this world. Your arrival is harbinger to my ascent. Kill what you must. Spill the blood of the weak among my host. Destiny will not yield.
To Callis, the arrival of the Vault Hunters was not a threat, but a sign. Further confirmation that her true purpose was to lead Kairos to freedom. And so, in a way, in the beginning, Callis never truly saw the Vault Hunters as her enemy. Her real true enemy was always the Timekeeper, and her faith was rooted in the conviction that her ascension and the liberation of her people lay through Elpis. In her second fight with her, she mentions how we killed the flesh of her. She was ready to be reborn and accept her destiny, to achieve her fire wings, only to then go mad upon learning her visions weren't of her destiny but of another woman who was in fact flesh and blood.
Hey, I got you. Thanks, killer. No, stay with me. Stay with me!
Flesh and blood? The vision was a lie. It wasn't me. It was her. She was always flesh and blood. There is no escape. There never was. Not for me. Not for anyone!
This revelation compelled Callis to go insane. Everything she believed in was wrong. There was no promised future, there was no hope. And as grimly as many believed it to be true, Callis finally admitted it herself. There was no escape. After a lifetime in servitude to the Timekeeper, 6 years of building up her own army and giving everything she had to achieve her true destiny, to break the chains of the Timekeeper off of Kairos and lead the entire planet to freedom, was all smashed in an instant, with everything leading up to that point seemingly confirming everything she saw and everything she believed in. Her death was a final glorious act of defiance. When fragments of Elpis came crashing back into Kairos, Callis was carried with the largest one of them. That single shard would tear through the walls of the Timekeeper's holy dominion, creating the breach that gave the Vault Hunters their chance to confront him at the very seat of his power. In her last moments, her voice echoed with the same visions that had once guided her, one last death. But instead of shedding her physical form to ascend and receive her fire wings, this death became the instrument of dethroning the Timekeeper himself, in a way, still contributing to her main goals of breaking free, albeit happening in a totally different way. Her death was a final glorious act of defiance. When fragments of Elpis came crashing back into Kairos, Callis was carried with the largest one of them. That single shard would tear through the walls of the Timekeeper's holy dominion, creating the breach that gave the Vault Hunters their chance to confront him at the very seat of his power. In her last moments, her voice echoed with the same visions that had once guided her, one last death. But instead of shedding her physical form to ascend and receive her fire wings, this death became the instrument of dethroning the Timekeeper himself, in a way, still contributing to her main goals of breaking free, albeit happening in a totally different way.
You think me a fanatic, a mad woman? He does too. The Electi had their chance to submit. Had Levain seen reason, she too could have bathed in my radiant flame. But soon, the left behind will all be nothing more than a faded memory.
Callis once recalled that the Timekeeper dismissed her as going mad, and in one direct address to the Vault Hunter, he even branded her as a vengeful lunatic. Yet her echo logs and her words to us reveal something deeper, that she had an unshakable conviction that she was meant to become something much greater. However skewed her sense of right and wrong may have been, Callis truly believed that her path was better than the alternative, of continuing to live under the Timekeeper's suffocating rule. Her visions of grandeur fused with her hatred of him, fueled by the unbearable feeling of his will plucking at her tendons, reducing her to a passenger within her own body whenever he took control. She might have made an extraordinary ally, had she not been so consumed by her fixation on becoming the woman she saw in her visions. Even so, the sheer scale of the army she built stands as a testament to her charisma. However fractured her dream, Callis gave her followers something to believe in, and at its core, the belief was not too different from the Vault Hunters or Zadras, escaping, breaking free. Callis even extended the same offer to the Vault Hunters, first under the simple exchange of returning her ripped bolt, and then they can join her. Later, it was a little more direct. She would invite them to join her cause because in her eyes, at that point their usefulness was undeniable. By killing those she deemed unworthy, they were unknowingly helping her forge a stronger army. And so Callis' story becomes something more than a tale of a broken prophet or a vengeful lunatic. It's the story of a woman who rose from the ashes of Carcadia burn, who turned torment into conviction, and who saw herself not as a victim of the Timekeeper, but as the phoenix destined to destroy him. Her death may have been her final act of defiance, but her legacy was carved long before that impact, etched in fire, obsession, and the belief that even madness was much better than continued submission. I want to take the moment to thank the channel patrons and members that help keep these uploads consistently coming out. Konkin, Daniel Homan, Mr. Naughty Priest, John Cooper, Ryan Smith, Ruben, Grijalva Jr., and Seagood. Big, massive thank you to each and every single one of you. The support truly means a lot. And for the rest of you, if you want some extra content, some early access behind the scenes, or even a podcast where things are a little bit more laid back, I pull the curtain back and you get an idea of the basic foundation of these videos or the much longer ones that I tend to put out every other month, then consider joining the Patreon or channel memberships here. Of course, they're not mandatory. The content is going to consistently come out the way that it does now. It's more of the extra mile, the special thank you to show direct appreciation for the quality of work that I put out, as well as some extra content in return. Like always, links are down in the pinned comment. Feel free to check it out, but thank you either way.